let's get this party started for our second installment of the Nazis and the Occult. I thought, maybe we'd start out by looking at some of Hitler's paintings because, there's a part of me that speculates that if Hitler was sort of just allowed to follow his passion of being a painter, that like none of this would ever happen. But, you know, and there's a lot of oftentimes like crossover between people in the arts and interest in the occult. And I always think that's very interesting. So here's a painting that Hitler did. I've seen, various criticisms of his paintings online, how their perspectives aren't very good. But so here's some Hitler's paintings here. Like, I mean, they're okay. They're not great. I mean, they're better than my watercolors that I've attempted over the years. This one looks kind of unfinished. So like lots of, yeah, I can see the issues with perspective. I mean, this kind of looks like something like maybe a middle schooler might churn out at some point, like a very talented one. Okay. But yeah, there's some issues here with this one. Yeah, I mean, I just think they're kind of boring. They're not like very interesting paintings. But, perhaps if he had been able to do this, he wouldn't have become such a hateful, scary demon person. I don't know. I think it's really interesting that in 2025, there are a lot of people trying to claim that Hitler was not an evil man. I think that's fascinating. And I guess one of my theories is that, like, really the whole Nazi project never completely died. They just escaped to other countries, the United States being one of them. We brought a lot of Nazi scientists over here for our space program. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know what could have been if he was just allowed to be an artist. I mean, I think nowadays he probably would just have been like some loser online. Maybe he would try to sell these paintings somewhere, like on like a street arts festival. I gotta say, like, some of them are better than, I mean, my paintings are terrible. So I'm fully aware that I'm not very good at painting at all. But it's fun. It's like something fun for me to do. And the reason I do these live streams, the reason I make YouTube is it's because it's fun. And whenever I stop, it's because it stops being fun. And I'm never really here to make any money or become very popular. I think if I ever got popular, it would probably scare me. But yeah, so these are some of Hitler's paintings here. Let me see if anyone's here. Any comments or thoughts on the paintings? No one is here. No worries. This will be up for the future as I look through. Hopefully the sound is okay. I'm in my living room today, and I have the air conditioner running, so I'm not sure if it sounds okay. So yeah, tell me what you think of Hitler's paintings here. Let's, I guess, leave one of them up while we read this book. Yeah, some of these are very bad. Let's leave this one up while I start. So chapter 3, Gods and Beasts. Gods and beasts, that is what our world is made of. And that is a quote from Hitler in The Voice of Destruction. In the years preceding World War I, German anti-Semitism was fed by an underground stream of secret cults running like a sewer beneath Vienna and other cultural centers. Hitler dipped into this stream. He lived in a flop house in the city's slum area, and his life and all the elements of a scenario had all the elements of a scenario for a Charlie Chaplin movie about the little tramp. He was 20 when he first came to Vienna in 1909, rejected for admission to the Academy of Fine Arts, and according to eyewitness accounts, lonely, shy with women, moody, and given to violent outbursts. He sounds like the OG kind of incel over here. In short, even in those squalid quarters where the struggle for existence must have brought out the brutal side of human nature, exceedingly odd. He later wrote in Mein Kampf of this period that it gave him the foundations of a knowledge which sustained him for the rest of his life. Quote, in this period, there took shape within me a world picture and a philosophy which became the granite foundation of all my acts. In addition to what I then created, I have had to learn little, and I have had to alter nothing. He spent much of his time studying Eastern religions, yoga, occultism, hypnotism, astrology, telepathy, graphology, phrenology, and similar subjects, which often appeal to pursuers of magical powers who usually happen to be powerless. His penchant for the occult led him to a tobacconist's shop near his lodging when he came upon a magazine, Ostara, which must have drawn him in. This strange publication was produced by the mystical theorist Lanz, who wrote under the acronym PONT, Prior Order of the New Templars. Vienna in those days was one of the fastest growing cities in Europe, and it was hospitable to the formation of occult groups which sprang up with religious fervor, symptomatic of the irrational atmosphere of the time. Vienna's population went up 259% between 1860 and 1900, and the flood of new arrivals sought relief from the frustrations of an overcrowded and expensive existence. The city was deluged by mediums, necromancers, and astrologers who claimed to be occupied with a futuristic science, which the scientific establishment was yet unable to appreciate, since experiments were still unverified. It kind of sounds like certain places in the United States that I've been, certain things what they call like spiritual centers, like Sedona, Arizona, kind of comes to mind. Um, Down here in Florida, there's Casadega, which is a colony of people, of mediums and astrologers, and you can go to Casadega still to this day and get, a fortune teller to tell you what they think is going to be your future. Um, it's an interesting place. If you have time, I would check it out. It started again in the late 1800s, um, which I think for me is one of the most fascinating time periods in American history that we often overlook. All of these spiritualist cults that formed, and it's just very interesting. I might read Mitch Horowitz's Occult America for my next book. I have a lot of books that I want to read to you guys. I think that's kind of what I'm doing with this channel right now. So let's continue. So Vienna was full of these people, and the whole thing with spiritualism was that they really were convinced that this was just something that science hadn't caught up with yet, and that idea has not gone away. The gullible, scholars included, believed that intuition and vision enabled specially endowed natures to investigate phenomena which eluded ordinary people. Lanz, a defrocked Cistercian monk, started his group, the Order of the New Templars, in 1900. His friend, Guido von List, a somewhat different sort of pseudo-priest, started his group, the Armenen, in 1908. So let's try to look up List's Armenen. Armenen. Yeah, all the runes. I mean, I still see these things today with like neo-pagan groups. Um, and I feel like there's a sort of revival of this kind of neo-paganism. And, what they did was they borrowed not only from the Eastern traditions, but from the older sort of Norse traditions and things like this. You see this sort of Celtic interweaving here. Um, yeah. So here's a list. Membership was often interlocking, and there was continual feedback between the cults. Around 1912, a number of members of both cults finally came together under one roof in their Germanen Orden, which prefigured the Nazi Party. Historians are divided on the question of whether Hitler was actually ever a member of either the Temple of the New Order or the Armenen, but it is certain that he was a reader of Ostara and met Lanz several times in that period. He later alluded to as providing him with the foundations of knowledge, which was to become important to him. And even if, this is my own commentary, even if he didn't meet these people or was not directly involved in these cults, there was still an overarching zeitgeist of interest in these kinds of things at this time. So I find it nearly impossible to believe that Hitler was not inspired by this stuff. Writing in an oracular, pseudo-anthropological manner, Lanz took mankind from the beginning of time and divided the species into ace-men and ape-men, the first being white, blue-eyed, blonde, and responsible for everything heroic in mankind. The second group was the repository of everything vile. According to this comic book mentality, the heroes called variously Aesings, Heldinge, or Areoheriker were superior by reason of breeding and blood, whereas the inferiors, Aflinge, Wanige, Schratlinge, or Sachandel, I can't read German, always threatened to contaminate through interbreeding. Ostara was one of a number of magazines which surfaced during this period. Like some of our own pulp magazines, it combined erotic and the occult in an irrational blend which would capture the fantasies of lost souls. And I think my note here was, are they even separable? And then I wrote sex magic, because a lot of these dark occult practices revolve around sex magic. And it's no surprise that these kinds of publications would blend these things together, the erotic and the occult. Its lurid stories were calculated to explain history as a struggle to the death between the pure Aryan and the hairy subhuman. This racial struggle, described in mystical, turgid prose, was the essence of human existence. To illustrate it, Lanz filled his pages with gorgeous blonde women falling into the snares of satyr-like men. I underline that. The satyr-like man, right? The sort of pan figure, kind of like demonic. For all the Aryan's superiority, it was quite evident that there was one way in which he was not superior: sexual prowess. The female member of the master race was sexual enough to be sure, but the male could not hope to compete against the enemy in having sufficient potency to satisfy the infinite needs of the blonde beauty. If this sounds reminiscent of the Ku Klux Klan's pronouncements against the inferior blacks, it is. The lower races must not pollute, through interbreeding, the rich blood of the higher races. Since, sexually, the races are more potent, this presents a considerable challenge to the hero. Lanz was writing in the tradition of a Volkish revival of the conservative Germanic ideal of woman as the keeper of the hearth, in contrast with the modern suffragette who is just then demanding her rights and asserting her own sexual needs. Race, blood, and sex combined with ancient German occultism, spells, number mysticism, to make an over-rich Viennese pastry. So they combined to make this kind of gross occult pastry, is what that sentence said. Okay. Not many soup kitchen derelicts seeking an escape from their hopeless state could resist such a package. Ostara and I'm not going to even try to read this German, but it translates to newsletters of the blonde fighters for the rights of men, addressed these men, for example, in its March 1908 issue when it ran a full-page advertisement promoting a book to help young men choose a career. "What shall I become?" read the advertisement. "It is all too clear what one regular reader, Hitler, became through the direct influence of Ostera upon him, though, the direct influence is not known." Like I said, I think really it was at the zeitgeist at the time. It was probably hard to even avoid it. Lands. So here's some images of the magazine that we're talking about. Hey, Terri, how are you today? Thank you for joining. Yes, please hit like and subscribe. Terri is in here to, I guess, help promote me, even though I think it's fine if only 5 people watch this channel. I do this out of sheer joy. I like reading. I like talking about my opinions. And, just personally speaking, I think that things in my personal life are definitely looking up today, especially. So I'm feeling good. So I'm going to continue. Excuse me. Thank you, Terri. I'm so glad that you're here to listen and that all is well in your life right now. Let us continue. His obsession with the nightmare vision of the seduction of hundreds and thousands of girls by repulsive bandy-legged Jew bastards is identical with Ostera's. We have Hitler's own confession that one of his favorite movies was King Kong, the plot of which might have been concocted by Lanz himself. I guess they're talking about the really old version of King Kong. King Kong original. And if you haven't seen the original King Kong, I kind of recommend it. It's pretty wild. I love all that old stop motion animation of this time period. For such mentalities, Ostera was thoughtful enough to provide a yardstick by which the reader could measure himself as to racial worth and be assured that he was not Jewish. The Rassenwertig something index. Rassenwertigindex. And that's the thing with German. They love to smash different words together and make them into like really long words. Anyway, this allowed him to score on the basis of eyes, hair, and skin color, and the size and shape of nose, hands, feet, skull, and even buttocks. Black eyes were 12 points to the bad. Blue eyes, or blue-gray eyes, 12 points to the good. Being a reader of Ostera was already sufficient qualification for membership in the mixed type, the stratum above the lower races. Hitler presumably would have rated himself in this category. With headlines like these: "Are you blonde? Then you are the creator and preserver of civilization. Are you blonde? Then you are threatened by perils. Read the Library for Blondes and Advocates of Male Rights." And subtitles like these: "Race and Nobility, Race and Foreign Affairs, The Metaphysics of Race, Ostera, 35 pfennigs a copy," sometimes reached circulation figures of 100,000 in Austria and Germany. The Order of the New Templars, we'll go back to this. The Order of the New Templars, which this ludicrous oracle founded, enrolled blonde, blue-eyed members, and only if they promised to marry women with the same attributes. This was of paramount importance, even though it would not guarantee race purity, since through woman sin came into the world, and it so over and over again, because woman is especially susceptible to the love artifices of her animal-like inferiors. The blonde Siegfried must win her away from the dark seducer, slaying dragons and giants if necessary. Our interest in this theology is enriched on learning that Lanz's New Templars were assembled as soon as he himself was expelled from the Cistercian monastery for carnal and worldly desires. Oh, wow. It really is. There's nothing new under the sun. So he had some issues, I guess, controlling himself in the monkhood there. Lanz, a teacher's son, was born in Vienna in 1874. He changed his birth date and place of origin to mislead astrologers. Um, let's see, is there an image of him somewhere? I think that's lists. Just give me a second here. I love that he changed his birth date to like throw them off, though. That's interesting to me. I was looking at Hitler's astrology chart before I started this. Oh my goodness. Oh, there he is. What's this website? All right, we'll just keep this picture up here. As a child, his wish had been to become a Knight Templar and to own Templar chateaux, or at least to reconstruct them. His strongest impression as a youth had been an opera, The Templar and the Jewess, which transported him into ecstasy. Occultists have always argued that the Templars, a medieval religious and military order, were a Gnostic sect working to purify the world of evil. And if anyone's familiar with Tracy Twyman's work here, she believed that they worshipped the severed head of John the Baptist. So that's some food for thought there. In 1893, at the age of 19, he entered the Cistercian monastery Holy Cross, which had an important place in Austrian history. The following year, he issued a work about a discovery which held secret meaning for him, a monument from the period of the Crusades of a manly figure treading barefoot on an animal-like human being. In this relief sculpture, Lanz saw the triumph of the higher races over the lesser races, and it became the symbol of his ideology. In 1900, a year after he was expelled from the monastery, he surfaced again as Baron von Liebenfels and started his order, usurping the name and rituals from his beloved Templars. His sign was the swastika, his slogan, race fight until the castration knife. Oh my goodness. This studious-looking, bespectacled man, as much as the model of a minor official as his kindred soul Himmler, preached a fall from a race-pure paradise that came about when the Arioheriker interbred with the dark races or the demonic slop work. The hero, Phrygia, the Gothic name for Jesus, came to save the Aryan women from the original sinner of sodomy through the commandment, love thy neighbor as thyself, if he is a member of your own race. And I'm just going to pause here. I think that's how I can tell certain things are satanic, or rather, if you don't like the term satanic, total inversions. They take these things and then invert them for their own purposes. And this is, I think very satanic indeed. This Lanz took to be the teaching of the Catholic Church in the Middle Ages. He called his theory Ariosophy. So let's see here. So here's the Wikipedia entry for his religion that he invented, all these runes and everything here. And I still see things like this happening today on the internet with a very strong revival. I think that's kind of interesting. Although I do want to say disclaimer is that you can't really trust. It's sad. Like you should be able to trust Wikipedia, but you really can't because of the open source editing that occurs. So you always have to read it with sort of a grain of salt. I think it's better to take Wikipedia and then like scroll all the way down and see what their sources were and then find actual books to read. So, um, as crazy as this may sound, Lands quickly found people who were willing to believe, and some of the believers were wealthy men ready to help Lands make his wildest dreams come true. With their help, he bought the castle of Werfenstein in Lower Austria in 1907. So let's see if we can find that. Werfenstein Castle. I think this is probably it. It's this old image here. Yeah, there it is. So he bought this in 1907. Other castles in Marienkamp near Ulm and on the island of Rügen in the Baltic were also converted into temples where the order conducted elaborate grail ceremonies. The carefully screened initiates, awesome in white hooded robes, perform performed celebrations written by Lanz. Using his monastic training, he also composed his own voluminous variations of liturgical texts, a two-volume New Templars breviary, the Psalms in German, and a secret Bible for the initiated, which ran to 10 volumes, as well as prayer books and the like. The race struggle was his major concern, but the order also dabbled in astrology, the Kabbalah, phrenology, homeopathy, and nutrition. After reconstructing somewhat the Werfenstein castle, fitting it out with Templar symbols of ritual magic, and raising up a swastika flag never before seen in that part of the world in modern days, he made plans for world salvation. To ensure the extirpation of the animal man and the propagation of the higher new man, he called for a radical program: genetic selection, sterilization, deportations to the ape jungle, and race extermination by forced labor or murder. Offer sacrifices to Pharuja, you sons of the gods, Lanz wrote. Up and sacrifice to him the children of the Schratlinge. He advocated the establishment of special breeding colonies for the production of more Aryans. He called his major work nothing less than a bunch of German words that I'm going to read the translation of only: Theozoology, or the lore of the Sodom apelings, and the election of the gods, an introduction into the oldest and newest philosophy, and a justification of royalty and nobility. He believed Aryan heroes, masterpieces of the gods, to be possessed of splendid electromagnetic radiological organs and transmitters, which gave them their special powers. By following his eugenic measures, they would revitalize their lost faculties. Joachim Fest, one of Germany's leading journalists, comments on this in his book, Hitler. Quote, "The age's anxiety, feelings, elitist leanings towards secret societies, fashionable idolization of science by dabblers in the sciences, all tied together by a considerable dose of intellectual and personal fraud, combined to shape this doctrine." Lanz was one of the most eloquent spokesmen of a neurotic mood of the age and contributed to a specific coloration to the brooding, ideological atmosphere so rife with fantasies of Vienna at the time. Exactly what had Hitler to do with Lanz? In Mein Kampf, the only possible reference to Ostera may be this one. Quote, "For the first time in my life, I bought myself some anti-Semitic pamphlets for a few Heller." His friend from childhood, August Kubizek, mentions that during this period Hitler joined an anti-Semitic lodge. But according to Lanz's biographer, Wilfred Dame, not only was Hitler a regular reader of Austera, but because he had missed several issues, he looked up Lanz himself in 1909, who was happy to supply him with back copies. In fact, says Dame, he saw Lanz a few times and left an impression of youth, pallor, and modesty. 15 months later, through these three changes of residence, the copies were still in Hitler's possession. Lanz claimed him as one of his disciples, writing to an occultist in 1932, quote, "Hitler is one of our pupils. You will one day experience that he, and through him, we will one day be victorious and develop a movement that makes the world tremble." Hitler attempted to bury all his later influences and his origins, and he spent a great deal of energy hiding them. Lanz was forbidden to publish after Germany annexed Austria in 1938. And I think, this is my own commentary here, I think part of that reason was he was trying to create his own cult of personality, his own religion that centered him, as a classic narcissist cult leader will do. Okay, so it wasn't because he didn't believe in these things. It was because he wanted to take all of these things, again, invert them or use them to create his own cult of personality. Hitler ordered the murder of Reinhold Hanisch, a friend who had shared the down-and-out days in Vienna, but the influence of Lanz's Erosophy is evident in passages like these from Mein Kampf. Quote, "By defending myself against the Jew, I am fighting for the handiwork of the Lord. This Jewfication of our spiritual life and mammonization of our mating instinct will sooner or later destroy our entire offspring. Blood, sin, and desecration of the race, and the original sin in this world, and the end of humanity which surrenders to it. With satanic joy in his face, the black-haired Jewish youth lurks in wait for the unsuspecting girl whom he defiles with his blood, thus stealing from her own people. With every means he tries to destroy the racial foundations of the people he has set out to subjugate. Just as he himself systematically ruins women and girls, he does not shrink back from pulling down the blood barriers for others, even on a large scale. It was, and it is, the Jews who bring the Negroes into the Rhineland." Wow. These conspiracies never have stopped. Always with the same secret thought and the clear aim of ruining the hated white race by the necessarily resulting bastardization, throwing it down from its cultural and political height, and himself rising to be its master. End quote. Here, surely, is the same paranoid, sex-obsessed imagination as the renegade monks. Right? I think a lot of times when you read these things, you have to understand that they're projection, sheer and utter projection. Let's see what's going on here in the chat. I got Dijon Paul and I got Terry Strange. Thank you. Maybe we'll look at Hitler's chart if you guys want to, if you're interested. He was a Taurus. I don't really know. I'm not like an astrology expert. It's not one of the things I'm very good at. Diagrams and charts are not my thing, but we can definitely look at what I was looking at. Starting your own religion takes some serious chutzpah. Not sure if I spelled that right. Chutzpah. Yeah, I think it is Yiddish. Yeah, definitely Yiddish. Yeah, they have electromagnetic powers, didn't you know? All right. So though we may never have certain knowledge as to whether or not Hitler was a member of the New Templars, there is ample reason to support that Lanz's nasty vapors helped to poison the Third Reich. The other Viennese occultist who attracted Lanz's disciples, Guido von List, presented a somewhat different variation of the occultist racist package. So let's go back to our image of List here. If anyone, like, I feel like if anyone's tracking my movements on the internet, they're probably like, what the heck? Um, anyway, let's see. So Liszt was born in 1848 to a rich Viennese merchant. At 14, in the catacombs of St. Stephan's Cathedral in Vienna, he vowed before a dilapidated altar that when he became an adult, he would build a temple to the pagan god Wotan. His life's work settled, he became first merchant and then a secretary of the Austrian Alp Society. Members used the Heil greeting, harking back to paganism. Liszt thought of himself as the link with an ancient race of Germanic priests and wise men called Armanen, Armanen, Armanen. Their holiest emblem was the swastika. Taking the same symbol which had been widespread use by many ancient peoples, he started his own secret society, the Armenen, in 1908. To the Germanic peoples, the swastika was an occult symbol for the sun, which represented life. German racists believed that one of the proofs of the inequality of the races was that some had more positive attitude towards the sun than others, and sun worship became a pagan ritual among the Volkish groups. I think I've told you about this before, but one of my favorite stories of the Father Brown stories is this one where there's like a cult that has a sun worshiper in it. Maybe I'll read that someday out loud. Liszt became a pioneer in reviving Teutonic folklore and mythology. This helped to prepare the climate for nationalism. The Armenen succeeded in attracting such people as Vienna's mayor Karl Lueger and the well-known theosophist Franz Hartmann. Liszt claimed that his group was the inner circle, hence the leaders of the Aryo-Germanic race, with power to unlock the secrets of the universe. They had the call. They were similar to God. They also happened to be radically anti-Semitic. Liszt apparently never lacked for rich supporters to finance his undertakings. His major undertaking was his plan to lead the master race, which presumed psychic powers led him to believe that he was qualified to do, having been in communication with ancients possessing esoteric wisdom. So this actually reminds me of Aleister Crowley and the things that he supposedly communicated with. And I often, when I read these things, think like, it sounds really wild, but it's in my estimation quite likely that they are communicating with demonic forces. That's just what I think. Just my thought. He looked like an ancient prophet with his long, flowing white beard. He taught his members runic occultism. Wotan was said to have invented the runes, the ancient alphabet, as part of his secret science. The Gothic runa means secret, secret decision, similar to the old Iranian rune, or run, secret, mystery. The early Finnish runo, taken from the Germanic, has to do with magic songs. Edgar Palome points out in his essay Approaches to Germanic Mythology and Myth in Indo-European Antiquity what Odin, another name for Wotan, originally acquired by hanging on the tree for 9 days, starving and thirsting as in a shamanic initiation rite, was a powerful secret lore of which the runes later on became merely a tool. The idea that the runes have occult significance was mentioned as early as AD 98 by Tacitus, who described the Germanic peoples as making marks on wood branches in order to practice augury and divination. Old Norse literature speaks of runes carved on wood, over which incantations or charms were spoken. Liszt wrote a book about runes in 1908. Like other German occult groups, he was preoccupied with magical power contained in the old alphabet. And this is why I believe that divination is probably a sin, because it just leads to this kind of stuff. I think it leads to direct contact with demonic entities. You're on Dystopian Deep Dives, so that's what I'm putting out there. Liszt had other concerns too, according to Trevor Ravencroft's book, The Spear of Destiny, largely based on the revelations of his friend Dr. Walter Stein, a Viennese scientist who was a student at Vienna University from 1909 to 1913, when Hitler was living in the city. A deep interest in occultism, particularly the Holy Grail, led Stein to a bookshop in the old quarter of Vienna that was frequented by Hitler as well. The proprietor, Ernst Pretzsch, had a group photograph on his desk showing himself with Liszt, whose books on pan-German mysticism were enjoying a great vogue. But the press had revealed black magic practices, sending Vienna into a furor. Liszt was unmasked as the leader of a blood brotherhood, which went in for sexual perversions and substituted the swastika for the cross. And indeed, I imagine that they were doing very strange things with sex magic and bodily fluids, because that's what it seems to be all about. The Viennese were so shocked that Liszt had to flee from Vienna. Ravenscroft reports that Dr. Stein told him how Hitler attained levels of consciousness by means of drugs and made penetrating study of medieval occultism and ritual magic, discussing with him the whole span of the political, historical, and philosophical reading through which he formulated what was later to become the Nazi Weltanschauung. Let me see if you guys are here and saying anything at all. Blue eyes. Terri, I would love to talk with you sometime about these communications. I'm glad you don't do that anymore. I'm happy for you. My eyes are like somewhat a greenish blue. I've been told that the color of my eyes means that I'm a witch. I don't know how seriously I take that, but this is something someone's told me before. I don't know. It sounds like silliness to me. But anyway, Pretzsch was introduced to Hitler, or had introduced Hitler, to consciousness expanding drugs. It's always the same story, right? You know, I'm going to take some psychedelics and I'm going to see some weird little like creatures. And I really think that like when you take drugs like that it really does open you up to forms of possession. I really think this. I think they're a really, really bad idea. You know, it really opens you up to being prone to like having, if not demonic possession, like really bad mental stuff happen to you if you don't believe in that kind of thing. All right, so consciousness expanding drugs as well as to astrological and alchemical symbolism. Hitler told Stein that Pretzsch, I don't know how to say this person's name, Pretzsche, had been present when Liszt tried to materialize the incubus in a ritual designed to create a moonchild, which is something that Aleister Crowley was very interested in doing with Jack Parsons over there in the desert of the west coast of the United States. Altering states of consciousness by means of drugs or sexual perversions are not unknown to occult groups. In fact, that's kind of their whole thing, author of this book. By daring to break taboos against acts which would disgust other people, one might gain powers of which ordinary men did not dream. Hitler's later reputation for unnatural practices may well have been deserved, may in fact have been inspired by tutors such as Lanz and Liszt. The historian Reginald H. Phelps, although he does not touch on the occult practices of Lanz and Liszt, points out in his article, quote, "Before Hitler came, the Tool Society and the Germanen Orden in the Journal of Modern History that they propagated their theories with varying success among intelligentsia and aristocrats, as well as among the famous foundering petty bourgeoisie that is supposed to be the chief consumer of such wares. The same names run through the same arguments and blow up the same balloons of theory year after year in book after book. At about 1912, disciples of Lanz and Liszt started the Germanen Orden under the leadership of a member of Liszt's Armenen, a journalist named Philip Stoff, and others. Theodor Fritsch was one of the founders and had a great organizational ability. Originally a technician for windmills, he then published a trade journal for millers, the Deutscher Müller, which provided him with the funds to pursue his real passion, scientific anti-Semitism. Let's look up our friend Theodore here. Theodore, not Roosevelt. Here we go. All right. Besides, windmillers represented a dying branch of the economy. From the 1880s on, he had been a leader in the pan-German movement. His books and tracts brought certain notoriety. In 1902, he began to publish The Hammer, a racist scandal sheet which aimed at eliminating all Jewish participation from German cultural life. He tried to spread the word to the workers as well as to the elite, calling for a racist nationalist organization that would combine the smaller groups into one above the parties. It was to be impeccably Aryan and was to bring enlightenment to the Germanic peoples. He was joined by a sealer of weights and measures from Magdeburg, Hermann Pohl, and also by Stoff, who brought with him several other Liszt disciples. The organization was made to be a secret for the purpose of combating what they believed to be the Jewish secret Bund, which was plotting world conspiracy, which someone left a comment under the first video I did of reading this book about said conspiracy. And that is why I think I will turn the comments off, because I don't really care to read things like that. One could only become a member by proving German origin to the third generation. Race science was to be taught, provable in the same way for human beings as the principles of scientific breeding had been established for plants and animals. The origin of all sickness was the result of the mixing of races, they held, which in fact is just not, it's like blatantly not true. And the more inbreeding you have, like the worse your like kind of genetic issues and disease become. So the principles of pan-Germanism were to be disseminated not only among Germans, but among all blood-related peoples. The fight was against all un-German thinking, which included Judaism and internationalism. And I wrote globalism. And then I also wrote, next to this paragraph, dumb. I think I read this book about 5 years ago. While the Germanen Orden violently opposed Freemasonry as international and Jew-ridden, it used Freemason terminology and organization. Pohl had a theory that this would guarantee secrecy. Also, Freemasonry's concept of brotherhood would help prevent dissension between members. Okay, and I did have a video that I made some time ago about how all of this operates, all these, secret orders that are, basically male bonding cults, and you can check that out. Their symbols were runes and swastikas, their costumes reminiscent of Wotan and paganism. Stoff and Pohl were the only open members. Closet cultists have always enjoyed the high degree of secrecy surrounding the meetings of occult groups. Rites are rarely, if ever, committed to paper. It is as if there is a recognition that power tends to evaporate and mysteries to become cheapened with exposure. At any rate, the initiation and the other rites must have been similar to those of the Freemasons and Lanz and lists groups. As with those other groups, there was inner and outer circles, with the latter, yearning to be admitted into the ranks of the former. The mysteries were revealed through signs and symbols which only the properly initiated could interpret, and only when deemed worthy. The typical occultist saw symbolism everywhere and hermetic significance in everything. Groups also borrowed heavily from each other, so that if one saw wisdom in the ancient rune symbols, chances were that another would adapt it. Staff and Liszt wrote books on runic wisdom. Meetings of Germanen Orden taught the same. I wrote next to this, peace doesn't need secret orders. Before World War I, despite countless leaflets distributed and propaganda spewed out, growth of the Germanen Orden was slow. Fritsch issued a call to action. The time for counter-revolution was at hand. For decades, the Germanic peoples had been sabotaged by the Taschendale, Lanz's term for the lower races. Now the chief criminals must be defeated. A few hundred courageous men can accomplish the work, said Fritsch. The Jewish liberal leaders must fall at the very start of revolt. Not even flight abroad shall protect them. As soon as the bonds of civic order lie shattered on the ground and law is trodden underfoot, the secret Vim enters on its rights. It must not fear to smite the mass criminals with their own weapons. The group, however, was not successful. Pohl, despite his concern with the binding cement of brotherhood, managed to quarrel with everyone. The war put the finishing touches on its defeat. Pohl wrote to a member in November 1914, Phelps reports, that finances were bad. Nearly half the brethren were with the military. The war had come on us too early. The GO was not yet completely organized and crystallized, and if the war lasts long, it will go to pieces. The childish play of ritual ceremony in the Orden wearied the members. Poles seemed to think that the banquets were the chief thing. Between 1914 and 1918, the Orden was inactive because most of its members were at the front. Of the known members, only Theodor Fritsch, the grand old man of German anti-Semitism, achieved lasting recognition. His anti-Semitical catechism, written in 1887, had more than 20 editions and sold almost 100,000 copies. His handbook for the Jewish question, a 1919 update of the catechism, reached 145,000 readers. Some years ago, in the suburb of Berlin, a monument was erected to his name. During the war, all the secret cults were dormant. Pohl was reduced to selling bronze rings inscribed with runic characters. They possessed, he claimed, a protective, magical quality, certainly much needed in those days. It was not until after the war that the occult anti-Semitic groups produced a mass movement. And that ends chapter 3. Let's see. See if you guys have anything to say. Nice, yeah. Maybe if I decide to revitalize my podcast, we could do an episode together about it. I don't know. Let me know. I learned Aryan means from Mars when I was tripping on Hawaiian baby wood. Wow, is that why Elon Musk is doing the Roman salute and wants to go to Mars? Oh my goodness. So I guess we could look at his, let's go, Adolf Hitler astrology chart. So this is his chart. For all of you astrologers out there, I am certainly not that well versed in astrology. I'm much better at reading tarot cards. These kind of charts sort of like, I don't know, they kind of like really repel me for some reason. I'm going to make a short pause here, and then we'll look at his chart, and then I'll close this out. I'll be right back. All right, so let's look at his chart. If any of you astrologers out there have any comments to make, do so now. But so apparently he has his sun in Taurus, his moon in Capricorn. His life path is a 5. I don't know. I guess we could find out what our compatibility would be. So he was born April 30th. Or no, sorry, he died then. That's interesting. When people are born and die around the same time. So Sun in Taurus gives people who are born under it calm and patient nature, which I don't feel like Hitler imbued at all. Sense of appreciation for beautiful and pleasant things. So I think maybe, yeah, he because he couldn't get his paintings and he couldn't be a successful artist. It's kind of like Hunter Biden. There are a lot of guys like that where they're like, they want to be seen, they want to be recognized, but the thing that they want to do, is not working. So then they do something else and maybe eventually become like crazy drug-addled cult leaders, as we see in the case of Hitler here. Excuse me. Moon in Capricorn, so safety and being useful to society, justification in the outside world, underestimate what you want for yourself, shyness. So yeah, it does describe him as initially being shy. But I think, he got a lot of anger. So I don't really know, what to make of this. It's not really so the numerology says these people need movement and change. They like to travel. They search for freedom and adventure. Yeah, I don't really have much to say about it. I think there was another one that I looked at. I don't know if it will give us more of an insight. I think this is the same one. Wait, there was one that I looked at, so let's like go back to like a regular search here. Hitler, astrology. I think it was this one. Capricorn. Yeah, I don't know. I don't put a lot of credence into astrology. It's not really my thing, but sometimes it's kind of interesting. When you have friends that that are really into it, like to explain it, it is kind of interesting to watch them talk about it. So let's see. This is not super helpful in my opinion. Why is it? It's like AI generated this. Adolf Hitler, you. Anyway, I guess that's enough of that, really. So, I think we'll just close it out. Um, let's see what you guys are saying. Yeah, I mean, if you're interested in discussing these things, or even discussing like your connection with, like, you know, radical feminism and how you sort of fell out of that, that would also be interesting. Um, Terry saying Chiron and North Node in ninth house of philosophy. See, so Terry, you're the astrologer. It's not me. Saturn in Leo in the 10th house. Uh, this all checks out, apparently. I guess I'll put it back on for, hold on. Wait a minute. Just in case if you know. Here's the one that I had. I liked the first site that I looked at. Yeah, this one I feel. Hold on. I guess here it is. So here it is one more time, just in case you want to check it out. I can't really read it. This is not my thing, even though I still kind of find it interesting. Jean Paul, I don't think I would ever like to be a cult leader because there's too much responsibility. I love that for you. Um, yeah, it's not for everyone. Yeah, Terry, take a look. Tell us what you think. Um, the sun in the seventh house. Oh boy. I used to do charts for people, but I've stopped for obvious reasons. I think it's very revealing of people's character and world events. Venus in seventh house is lucky too. Hmm. Yeah. Any other thoughts before we close it out? What do you make of this chart? I don't actually think, I mean, my personal belief system is not it's not that these things are like evil, it's that they can be used in an evil way. Uh, so that's just what I think. Um, but I do think if you're using it for like power or manipulation, uh, you know, then it's evil. Although, you know, according to Christianity, divination is a sin. And I think the reason why is that a lot of these things can bring very dark energies into your life. That's what I think. That eighth house is in Gemini, very interesting. So, what's your assessment, Mike? If you could make a short assessment, unless you don't want to, because it's like, making you uncomfortable. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think these things can be done in a thoughtful and, um, light pathway, let's say. Terry says the sin is putting your trust in anything created before your creator. Hmm. Right. Like, so to like maybe trust these things over God. I mean, I think when people are doing divination, they are probably contacting some very dark entities. Uh, but I don't think it's like automatically evil to be interested in like astrology or tarot reading. Um, all right. Terry says My assessment is he was a natural leader with a strong ability to attract and form alliances with people. Very interesting. So, thank you, Terry, for your assessment of this astrological chart of Hitler's. Um, and I'll be reading like the rest of this book. I don't know about when I will continue it, but I do have some things coming up in my real life that are promising. So I don't know when I'll be able to do this again. It won't be tomorrow, or I mean, it could be, but we'll see. Um, and yeah, I think that is it. Attracted to beauty and pleasure. Wouldn't that be, yeah, because he's like a sun in Taurus. Kind of lazy. I don't know. That's what I've been told. Um, so that's it for me today. I hope everyone enjoyed that. I hope it was illuminating and interesting for you. Um, until next time, I will check you on the flip side. Take care. Have an awesome time doing whatever you're doing. Peace in the Middle East.